everybody. This is our first CF Search Marketing vlog where we will be covering streaming smarter, why dealers should be advertising on Amazon OTT. My name is Eric Long, and I am the marketing manager with CF Search Marketing. And I'll let my friends here introduce themselves.
Yes.
Good.
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go. You go. Ladies first. I insist.
All right. Stephanie Westfall, CF Search Marketing. I have a long title, but it's Regional Director of Sales and Strategic Marketing Partnerships, whatever you want to call it. Been here at CF for 7 months now. I've been in the business for 20 years, so 20 years deep from the retail side, 10 years, and on the outside sales side for 10 years.
My name is Tim Dare. Been in auto for about the past 20 years, working at media and technology firms, everything from CDK to Pandora to Oracle. Most recently, I spent 5 years in Amazon, really helping advertising agencies in the dealership space and dealers really understand and leverage the power of Amazon to really reach a consumer, but ultimately to measure media more effectively back to what's driving sales on the lot, both online and offline. And we'll talk a little bit about that today.
Awesome. And like I said, I'm Erica. So I have been in auto now 9 years, but I have background in design. So I've been in the design industry now for 15 years. I'm aging myself. But I've also been in lots of different fields. I've worked with healthcare, printing like Shutterfly. I've also worked with your basic stuff like team photos for like your kids' sports teams. But automotive has been my longest thing. I started off basically as a graphic designer doing dealership advertising, working my way up to supervisor, doing branding pages and branding programs, according to manufacturers for their needs and their standards, also while complying with, federal, local government rulings when it comes to advertising. And now here I am marketing with our company for CF Search, making sure we are doing what the dealers need in order to be successful. And one of those things we're going to talk about is what's going to help out with dealers is we're going to be talking about Amazon OTT and streaming TV and how that can help dealerships connect with real in-market shoppers using smart data and premium content, which, it's Q3 and Q4 coming up soon. So this would now be a really great time as a dealership manager for you to be evaluating what your end of year, costs and budget needs to be in order to stay ahead and what's the best avenue you can do to spend your money wisely.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that I actually had a meeting with yesterday with one of a dealer group that is coming on with CF Search Marketing is specific to video. And one of the things that they've been heavy in is traditional. And their biggest complaint has been we can't track from what we do from our traditional TV, newspaper, radio to what actually comes in. We've talked in the past about the shift, right, from cable to TV specifically and what that's going to do for them. Obviously, you have the, amazing ROI. You have those conversions that you can physically see on the screen, right? So you know from a metric standpoint what's working and what's not. It's interesting because 92%, it's a brand new stat that I was just reading about, of potential buyers research online before buying. So if 92% of those consumers are researching online, what is the biggest thing that we as millennials and Gen Zs and XYZ and all the things that we are doing right now? It's interesting because 5.1 households have, well, 5.1 households have streaming services. So the average of that is typically around 3.6 specific to video subscriptions, which is a very interesting fact as of late. And Tim, what are you seeing?
Yeah, you know what I think is interesting when it back to when every one of us in marketing had to go from the shift from like how do we think about mobile first? I had a BlackBerry. that BlackBerry was probably the coolest phone that I ever had.
I
Best
love that
phone.
Um,
BlackBerry.
Best
That thing was
phone.
indestructible.
Best phone,
I
right?
threw that thing so far one time and it still worked. And I dumped it in the lake, still worked.
Oh yeah, I dropped
It's
mine down
great.
a flight of like 3 flights of concrete stairs, and the battery just popped off. I popped it back in, and it was working. But okay, segue over. Sorry.
Sorry, Tim.
No, all good. I mean, that was my favorite phone I've ever owned outside of like the lint getting stuck in the trackball,
Oh yeah.
that's a story for another day. But we all had Blackberries at one time, and then the iPhone came along, and we had to really shift our thinking from, all right, consumers are looking at their phones. How do I think about creating a media strategy to meet the consumer where they are today? That same shift is happening in real time in the streaming TV landscape. So if you think about what the interface of a TV looked like even 3 to 4 years ago versus what they look like today, the interfaces are so much more intuitive, which has allowed publishers to push premium content into a streaming first strategy. And consumers are then able to access that content in a much more seamless way. And so that same shift is happening right now. So the consumer adoption is really being driven by technological change, and we as marketers really need to think about, okay, how do I start to think about taking advantage of that technological change? I saw a stat really recently that 50% of 50% of TV consumption is occurring within streaming, but only 15% of the ad spend has moved into a streaming strategy. So there's a real opportunity if you're a dealer to think about, how do I augment my strategy to beat my competition so that my brand is first and foremost in their minds and their eyes.
Yeah, I just find it ironic because I remember the original reason why a lot of people signed up for streaming was to get away from ads. I mean, I know I'm the first one to vote for that, right? Because I hated ads on TV. Now that I'm actually in advertising, I'm like, wonder what the ads are. So whenever I'm streaming, because I'm one of those people, I stream only. I haven't had cable in like forever. And the only time I ever see like actual ads is either when I'm streaming on certain platforms like Amazon or Peacock, right? That's when I see whatever's current and, for ads going on. And the other is, social media. Social media is still huge with getting in with ads and everything like that. So it's definitely a different kind of industry going on right now. But, so Tim, with that being said, since you are our special guest from Amazon, what is it that, that makes Amazon right now the best option for dealers to be choosing?
I think you need to think about it from like two different lenses, right? One, when you think about streaming TV, I like to think about it from the opportunity to reach consumers at scale. So if you think about the way that you would traditionally buy linear TV, you would always look for opportunities to buy the number one TV station in the market because that gives you the highest reach and penetration into the consumer landscape, right? So the same thing can be said about streaming TV. So you've got the opportunity to reach consumers within Prime Video, which has about 130 million active monthly unique viewers, but you also have the opportunity to reach consumers through every other major media streaming platform, right? So things like CNBC, Fox Sports, Hulu, ESPN, all of those named publishers, you have the opportunity to then connect with through those pipes and then apply really rich audience data from Amazon and or any sort of in-market audiences that we can bring together. That includes a dealership's own first-party data.
And that's super important right now is, first party data, third party data. It's, for the dealers to, what's the best avenue they can use with all of that data and use it wisely. So, and I was reading, the stat on here, with you guys with Amazon, you guys have the Amazon garage, which is what, 190 million vehicles?
Yeah, so when I think about the landscape, right? If I'm a dealer, I think about it in like three different buckets when you think about an audience strategy. Um, so you want to be able to reach consumers that own a vehicle, right? For any number of reasons. So a consumer that, might own a Chevy Tahoe or a Silverado. The way Amazon develops their first party audience data is that there when you shop for a part on Amazon, you put in the year, make, and model of that vehicle. So the online parts business for Amazon is significant. It's pretty large. It's billions of dollars annually. So they have a lot of data on what consumers are shopping for, and then those vehicles are then tied back to the actual household. So not only do you understand that consumer might own let's call it a 2015 Silverado or a 2022 Dodge Ram, but you also start to understand what else are they shopping for, what else are they streaming, and then that allows you to really create a rich audience strategy. So you can start to create trade up and trade out campaigns. You can start to create conquest campaigns. What is this consumer in market, or from like a vehicle standpoint? Are they looking to buy another truck? Um, you can also start to understand the life stage that they're in. So maybe these consumers are also getting married or having new children. Maybe they're moving, um, all which are really indicative of a consumer's decision to move into market to buy a vehicle. There was a study done last year that showed that 72% of automotive purchases were actually accelerated by a life stage event in the previous 12 months. So now you can start to create an audience strategy that really starts at the top of the funnel and then moves down the funnel, creating a full funnel audience strategy to reach those consumers when they're in the moment to make a buying decision.
And it also actually, I'm just saying this from personal experience, when I moved from South Carolina to Florida, right, that's about like a 10-hour drive. So I had to prepare my mini, to make that kind of distance. And I used Amazon to, buy parts because, and that it doesn't have to be just car shopping either. It could be, a dealership's after sales department utilizing this as well. I had to look up parts for my Mini Cooper, and after that, it kept giving me recommendations based off of what me just giving the basic parameters, the year, the make, the model, and then from there it gave me recommendations, and it still does to this day. But that's actually kind of cool because Amazon already does that for you just based off of your shopping. That's kind of cool. Dealers, can be using that kind of information to do their actual video advertising for actual car purchasers.
Absolutely.
I
And
think what Go ahead,
oh,
Steph. Sorry.
no, go ahead. I'll finish
No,
in a second.
no, fire away, fire away.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing too is I mean, you think about Amazon is the biggest, right? We all buy something from Amazon and we all subscribe to Amazon Prime. And that's one of the things that there are so many amazing shows on there. And I mean, myself and my children, we watch Amazon all the time. But we have, so I think this is embarrassing to say, but I mean, I've been a cord cutter for a very long time. But it comes down to you have so many like different specific shows that you watch. But the thing with me that I've always kind of it hit home on me because I am marketing is what ads show up to me that are more relevant. So me actively being online and shopping online and doing everything online, what's actually going to show in front of my face of what I've actually been showcasing on my searches, right? And truly Amazon has been the one in the forefront that has actively shown me exactly what I've been searching for from a search perspective, which is very interesting because you think about how the demographics, are supposed to pull from these different streaming services, but it truly is the one that to me has the best KPI conversion and a unique value proposition when it comes to the consumers actively watching that streaming service, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think it's important to really understand that while you're reaching consumers on Amazon Prime, you're also again like reaching consumers no matter where they're streaming and what they're streaming, right? So you're really taking an audience first approach and then allowing the consumer to discover your brand, whether that's on Amazon Prime or on, MLB Network or any other premium publisher that's in the marketplace.
Mhm.
And to your point, Steph, I think what we're seeing is that the top of the funnel media, meaning streaming TV, is really driving consumers down the funnel and really has a dramatic effect on how consumers are searching for your brand through Google. We did a study recently that about 30% of dealership traffic was actually influenced by a programmatic streaming TV commercial. And you can see that activity from increased brand searches, consumer time on site, increased VDP views. And those are just some online indicators. But then you can tie all of that data back to an actual vehicle sale.
Mhm. Yeah, the matchback attribution, which is huge, and that's what dealers want. And it's interesting, again, going back to the conversation I had with the dealer yesterday in person, one of the things we talked about, because they're having a huge issue with what is working, right? And
Yeah.
what's working, because what we typically see in our industry coming from the marketing vendor side is a lot of it is that set it and forget it mentality. And it's not really structured properly for each individual dealership. And when it comes down to it is you have to have that authenticity, right? You have to have that custom approach, not that generic just message that you just throw out there and see if it sticks. So one of the things I went back to and I talked about yesterday is when I was in the dealership, one of the first things that I really started honing in on was how do consumers shop when the digital era was just starting. One of the big things when we drove consumers into our, brick and mortar location is we wanted to get them into the vehicle. And the reason why we wanted to get them into the vehicle is so they can see it, smell it, feel it, and obviously fall in love with it. Well, now, since you have 92% of consumers that are online searching, how do you do that from a video or a marketing standpoint to draw that consumer to your virtual real estate and, of course, your brick and mortar location? So that comes down to video. You have to have that see it, smell it, feel it virtually on your video campaigns to drive that consumer. So, not just having those basic generic ads, having something that really speaks to that consumer is so important when it comes to anything from a, video strategy these days.
I think
Yeah,
also a good point to just point out too is that, for a while there was a competition, for advertising, whether to do it like social media used to be the biggest thing to do your advertising on because everybody was attached to their phone. What I think is great when it comes to, for a dealer to do on Amazon, it's kind of like we almost went back in time like 10 years where, they're back on TVs. It's most people are watching streaming through TV, not their phones. So that's kind of a big thing. We're going back to how it used to be where you'd want to be on your great ad channel space, during primetime TV. But, Tim, I'm sure with how it calculates now, you don't have to worry about what time it hits, right? Now it's you hit you set your parameters and you can be able to hit the streamer anytime they watch, no matter what time of the day.
Mhm.
Yeah, we see that about 90% of streaming TV consumption actually happens on the largest screen in the house. Um, and the time that the consumer is actually spending watching TV does still follow the traditional viewing times of yesteryear, right? So it's the same mentality, but the delivery mechanism is just slightly different and it's a lot more targeted to consumers that are actually in market for your vehicle. And then you can hold your media dollars a lot more accountable. I think
Mhm.
that the opportunity to understand that I served a TV commercial, and then that TV commercial had influence on the consumer journey to ultimately purchase a vehicle is is really what's allowing dealerships to start to shift dollars faster and quicker into a streaming first strategy.
And it's interesting. A good, kind of good segue is one of the case studies that we have, and we of course with CF has, we have numerous case studies, but one of the ones that kind of hits home a little bit, because of the level targeting that we have from the DMA, the city, the zip, like all the amazing demographics that we have available, right? The case study specifically was we did see a specific 30% traffic lift, right? We had 28% form lead conversions. And these are actual human beings, not bots, not tire kickers, not 15-year-old kids like my son looking every single day online or clicking. It's actual humans. So from those phone calls, those leads, we actually then boiled it down to, the CPS, so the cost per sold vehicle, which was down around 67 to around $256, which when we look at any type of ROI stat from really anything from a marketing, or as I like to call it, digital approach, is that's really a good average. It's actually an exceptional average these days coming from such a kind of a little oversaturated marketing, right? When you come to kind of like the search display, all the things. But when you start leveraging even more data like Amazon has and being able to deliver in front of that consumer on all the networks that they're watching, because that's what Amazon obviously has, then you can really start, lowering that cost per acquisition for that consumer and getting those more valuable leads into your CRM and of course to your dealership.
I was
Yeah, I
going to
think on
add,
the piece on a saturated market is really important, right? Like to understand that, especially today, that streaming TV, there is an opportunity to really grab your unfair share of the consumer's share of mind,
Mhm.
right? With 50% of the TV viewing happening in streaming, but only 15% of the ad spend going to streaming, you have that opportunity to say, okay, I am going to take my unfair advantage here and really capitalize on my competition and be first in market and be more aggressive in market and ultimately capture more conquest dollars, capture more share within the market, and really be the one dictating the terms of the market rather than catching the rain, so to speak, or catching demand based upon search volumes. You've got the opportunity to really create demand for your dealership and for your brand, rather just than letting the market dictate how much share you have.
100% agree. And this also, I know, Erica, you're going to say something before I have a Dory moment, as I call them. Um, one of the big things is again, I talk about service absorption rate for dealers because again, there's such a huge opportunity specific to streaming services, right? There's also a huge opportunity when it comes to your fixed op department. So typically we only see 29% of dealers utilizing, if not a little bit more, give or take, utilizing their budget for fixed ops. So because Amazon has such an amazing space to be able to utilize, not just from a sales perspective, but also fixed ops, is huge for dealers, and then really being able to capitalize on every single, basically department, right, in their dealership to help set them apart. And again, it goes back to what I said, is that authenticity, that custom approach that we, when we speak to dealers, right, when we speak to our clients, is how do you shop? What do you look for? Because we have to think about that. It's always we have to play the game when it comes to search engines and how kind of the algorithms also work, but it's also how we search as humans. So when we see something online that captures what we've been searching for, right? Then that's obviously then going to help draw us in a little bit more. It's like throwing that, fishing line out and then hopefully getting the big fish. So it's a little bit more obviously tailored approach when it comes to the marketing aspect of it and what we're able to do. But that's kind of my best analogy when it comes to it.
Well, I think the
Yeah,
best thing that we
well
can be
said.
able to describe is when it comes to basic digital marketing, you have your normal, trifecta. You have the dealer has their website. They've got to be on search engine marketing. They've got to be on Google. They got to be on Bing. They, have their presence known, especially now how AI overviews is, right? You want to make sure your SEO is good. And then the third thing is, and this has been, something that's now a norm is social media. So those are usually the top three things usually dealers invest in to make sure that their presence is, going in all corners of their area, right? So, but the biggest thing that we can say now with our clients and that we've seen from our case studies is that we have actually seen dealers turn more anonymous browsers into booked appointments, sold vehicles, more foot traffic just based off of streaming alone. It's a fourth avenue that they could be taking, again, kind of going back in time instead of investing in traditional broadcasting. Now your dollar can stretch even further by investing into streaming. So, and I think that's another avenue that, we need to be pushing up to the front.
100%. Yep.
So,
Yep.
okay. Let's go ahead and start doing up our roundtable. So, and just let's go over some common questions, misconceptions. I can start poking at you guys at normal questions that people normally ask when it comes to paying for
Did you
streaming.
freeze Erica?
So, one big one I know that will get asked a lot is, is streaming only for big national brands? Can a small mom and pop, dealership or a used dealership that's not, manufacturer or OEM driven, can they also be able to do streaming too?
I mean, I think we're seeing that more and more every day, right? That dealerships in particular are one of the fastest growing adopters of streaming TV, and they're doing it one because video really drives their brand, but two because you can start to hold your media a lot more accountable. I mean, Steph, I don't know if you're seeing the same thing on your side, but we certainly are seeing that at large.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the biggest thing is it all comes down to the ROI because dealers, we always talk about that spray and pray method, but when it comes down to it is all dealers want to see is their actual ROI from it. If you can't track that, then obviously dealers are going to, of course, typically move. They're not going to trust who they're partnering with. But when it comes down to specifically from a digital standpoint and this, of course, the streaming side, yeah, we can track every single bit of ROI. So we can see how many consumers, where they're at, what they're shopping for. Obviously, like, we talked about earlier, it's the sales attribution model. I mean, that's that's the name of the game when it comes down to it is what are you doing? How much are you paying for it? And how big of a return on your investment did you get from that? And
Yeah,
that's the beautiful thing
agreed.
about it. Yeah.
I think another big question, I mean, and I'm always one to do this because I'm cheap, right? I'm not, well, baby cheap's not a good word. Frugal. I'm extremely
That's a
frugal
better
for
word,
my Asian genes, right?
Erica.
Yeah. So, I mean, the one thing we're always going to get asked with dealers is this too expensive for my store?
That's I think anything from, but I when I talk to dealers, a lot of them are still spending 20, $30,000 on regular cable. And when I go down and I do analyses of what they're spending and I look at, what they're not getting, from traditional cable companies, what they or say they're getting, right? But then you look at what they're getting from all the other digital sources that are trackable, they're spending a substantial amount more. I mean, we're talking 50, 60, 80% more from traditional standpoint than you can spend on digital. And then where you're going to save more money, right? You're going to have a better conversion. And of course, you're going to load your bank account a little bit more. So, and that's what it comes down to. It's just making sure you're utilizing the tools most effectively because there are so many tools in the toolbox. What's going to be the best for each individual store? Well, that depends. If you have a very rural store that, is maybe a little bit better on a little less digital, but when we can start marketing a little bit more. However, when it comes to streaming, you know, those consumers are still going to be watching probably NFL football, right? On Mondays and Thursdays and Sundays. So, kind of tailoring that solution to them a little bit, peppering in a little bit more. But then when you have the more suburbs and, the big cities, obviously that comes into more to play. So you can take all that money that they're spending, convert that into streaming video, and you're going to get freaking, your digital on steroids, if you will, and you're going to have such a better ROI from that.
Yeah, that's great. You're well said. Nothing to add.
All right, so
Mic dropped.
you did mic dropped, but you did it well.
Thanks.
So what another good question is how's the dealer going to know if it's working? I mean, aside from the obvious, getting foot traffic, but what's a good way that we could be able to show a dealer, that it's working, like is reporting, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I
I
mean, go
or,
ahead, Tim.
uh, yeah, I think you can think about it in two different lenses, right? Or let's call it three different lenses. Um, One, we start to understand every time we serve an impression, we can see where that impression was served and drop an identifier. And that identifier allows us to understand if a consumer saw a programmatic ad or a streaming TV ad, and then what actions did they subsequently take. Maybe they saw a streaming TV ad and then they went to Google, they performed a search, and in that search, they then went via like an organic click to your website. In most cases, Google would say that that was an organic search consumer. Really, we have the ability to understand, although that may have been an organic search click, that consumer was influenced by a streaming TV commercial. And then if that consumer then purchases a vehicle, oh, we can understand we serve that impression to that consumer. They then performed an organic search visit. Oh, they also actually bought a vehicle. So now you're starting to tie together a full funnel around that consumer journey and know the path in which they took to ultimately buy a vehicle. And that's where the power really comes in. I firmly believe that media is sexy to sell, but measurement really drives media activation and really allows you to really have an impact on your business and then hold your media dollars much more accountable in the marketplace.
Agreed. I mean, think about how many digital touch points there are, right? I mean, and again, there's averages out there. You can, you know, AI, Google search this or Claude or whatever AI you want to do. There's so many different searches that we do, right, from a standpoint. But when it comes down to it, is how do you boil it down to make sure you're actually directing to that consumer, to drill it down to that low funnel consumer. So really making sure you have a presence throughout really all the digital channels. But again, it goes back to the point that I made earlier, talking about when you have a video content, because that's the most searched is video. Everybody looks at video. I look at reels all day long. I mean, everything. It's crazy. Not just because I'm in the space, it's just literally in front of my face all the time. Or my kids show me something. But when it comes down to is really making sure, from a CF standpoint, how we utilize this specifically for our clients. And again, it goes back to making sure we have that custom approach. So having that see it, smell it, feel it for consumers that's watching those ads to draw them in to make that click. So, going to your point too, Tim, about, how it's all layered down is, when we look at campaign builds and specific to budgets and creative, the big thing with us is, we're not just going to throw a wet noodle up and see if it sticks from a marketing, advertising standpoint. It's going to be, let's focus on what works for you. If we have to focus on something the OEM's doing for co-op purposes or whatever, 100%, we're going to make sure we're in compliance with that. But we also have a lot of other dealers, maybe just an independent dealer that wants to do something completely wild. That's awesome. Let's do it. But we're also just not going to say, well, we need you to spend X amount of money, right? Because it may not work. It may be that they need to spend less money to be able to have a good campaign that's going to be effective to them. And that's the other big thing too is, when we do meet with our dealer clients, it's not just we're going to meet with them and just show them a report, right, at the end of the month and say, here, great job, let's move on to the next. It's let's see what's working. Let's see what's not working. And if it's not working, let's fix it, right? So as we know, auto is ever changing. Every single day is something different. So we had to make sure we stay, on our toes to make sure we're doing the best for our clients. And that's the biggest thing when you work with companies such as ours and, a lot of other different vendors that we know and love. It's really just making sure we're doing the best for our partners, and which is, of course, our dealer partners.
Awesome. All right. And I think last one we should just bring up is, me as a Prime user, for a long time, one good question I'm sure a lot are gonna ask is, how will I know when my ads are streaming? And we already covered that earlier. It's gonna be all throughout the times of the day when people are on. But, one good question is Tim, what if people who have add-ons to their Prime account? Like for me, I already know I got add-ons. I got my Max, I got my Paramount Plus. Because I share with my mother, I have PBS Masterpiece, you know. So, but I know some of those are now doing ads. So would those, would the ads that a client pays for Amazon ads, would those actually work on the add-ons as well as if the add-ons are doing commercials?
Yeah, I mean, it's every publisher out there, Erica, right? So Paramount Plus, it's now HBO Max, CNBC, all of those premium publishers that you know and are familiar with. And we have insight into what those publishers look like, what's the impression delivery on each publisher. Of course, there's reporting that also we can bring forward so that you can understand what programming and publishers your commercials are being aired on. So there's a ton of transparency in the marketplace that allows you to really understand how your ads are being served, where they're being served, and across what publishers.
And one other thing I just want to mention, like want to make mention, and Tim, if you can answer this, because I know a lot of times dealers do have questions on where is the ad going to show, because it's obviously not going to show when they're on their Amazon, searching, right? It's Amazon video when they're watching videos, on,
Correct.
yeah, on Amazon video.
Yeah, correct. I think that's a really important point, Steph, is that, we're not talking about ads on Amazon.com. We're talking about video commercials in a streaming TV environment. Amazon happens to be the pipe in which that we buy the commercials and the ability to reach a consumer. So I like to think about it much like an investment platform. So you've got your investment platforms like E-Trade or Fidelity, where you're buying and selling ETFs and stocks. They are a platform that enables you to functionally transact. And Amazon is very much the similar platform that allows you to transact and then leverage their data, just more like, an E-Trade where they have their proprietary research that you can leverage to buy a stock. Amazon has their proprietary research that allows you to reach consumers no matter where they're watching or what stock that you may want to purchase.
Mhm. It's a very good analogy.
I can attest to that. When I was in New York a couple weeks ago, which was far away from home, I was watching Prime on my phone, trying not to wake up my sister because I don't know why I was awake at 7 a.m. But I was still getting ads, local ads for South Carolina. I'm like, I'm not home. Like, shouldn't I be getting New York? I shouldn't have said that out loud because then for the next week I got nothing but New York ads. So it just goes to show you it does track real time information, based off of your history and stuff like that. But that was pretty cool because the marketing brain in me would be like, oh hey, look, it does work. So I'm a nerd, I'm sorry. But anyways, well, if you guys are curious about more on Amazon streaming TV, how it can work for your dealership, let's talk, schedule a demo on our website. You guys can contact us through our social media channels, or you can give us a call. Our phone number's on site. Schedule a demo or consult with us, totally free of charge. Will only take 15 minutes maybe of your time. And we work with Tim's team directly there. So you're getting the best of both worlds. But I just want to thank Stephanie and Tim for joining us for our first official vlog. And Tim, especially, thank you for taking the time to speaking with us today.
Anytime. Yeah. Thanks for pulling all this together.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
See ya.